from her over the years. If anybody's an expert on what's coming or what's not coming, it's Karen Hemohill. So let's give a warm Watergate welcome to Karen Hemohill.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank IT for the 5-minute tutorial on how to set up the projector and computer for the first time. I've never done that before, so hopefully it continues to work. I have with me today also Ronnie Patrick from the Emeryville Transportation Management Association. She's with Ray Bowen, and she, as you will see later, is part of a consulting firm that contracts with the Emeryville Transportation to administer the show. And unfortunately, our city manager, Sabrina Lander, was not able to make it today, but she's entrusted me to be able to give a presentation about her. So I will endeavor to do that. We also do not have with us today NGS Local Government Solutions, who was our special assessment engineer. They did attend the 2 community meetings that we had at City Hall. But I think I should be able to ask any of the questions that you might ask of them. And if there is a question that's asked that I cannot answer, I will get back to you as soon as possible. Shortly after this meeting, I'll be working on a frequently asked question, an FAQ, of the questions that people have had about the Emery Go Round and about the proposed extension of the property-based business improvement district as the primary funding source for the Emery Go Round. And so I will make sure that any questions that I may need to get back to you about, I will do so through those frequently asked questions, and I will provide a copy of that to Tim.
Okay.
So, I noticed that most of you here are, I have not seen before in our previous community workshops. So this will be kind of a basic Emery Go Round property-based business improvement district kind of 101. And I will go through it in a way that I hope is not too slow for those of you that know a lot.
Microphone, please.
Oh, okay. That's not too slow for those of you that have heard this before, but not so fast so that for those of you that it's new, that you can follow along. So the Emery Go Round is a no charge to riders service that connects the city to MacArthur BART station, as well as provides connectivity within Emeryville and connects to the West Berkeley shuttle. It is considered one of the most successful last mile shuttles in California. And last year, 2014, there was just under 1.7 million boardings. Actually, if I was going to be specific, 1.689. And this is equivalent to less than $2 per boarding, which is including overhead administrative costs, which makes it the most efficient bus system in Northern California. The Emery Go Round is primarily funded through a citywide property-based improvement district, which is a special assessment district levy. Some of you may be from other cities. We don't have too many assessment districts in Emeryville, but in other countries there's sometimes underground utility districts. We do have a special assessment district for Shell Mound roadway that was done quite a few years ago. In some cities, for example, there's also lighting or landscaping districts. In Emeryville, the only assessment district that we have other than for Shell Mound is the property-based business improvement district. In addition to that, there are a few, so outside of the district, there are a few properties that pay into the Emery Go Round through their project's conditions of approval or developer agreements. There are 2 service contracts, one to operate the West Berkeley shuttle and the other to operate the 8-to-go paratransit van shuttle out of the senior center. Both of these contracts are completely funded through the contracts and do a modest return for the service for the Transportation Management Association. And there's a very small amount, under $26,000 miscellaneous, advertising, interest payments, such things. So for those of you who are not familiar, you can see that the Emery Go Round shuttle does pretty much cover all of the city and goes to the Garth Bart, as well as goes to the West Berkeley Bowl. At the West Berkeley Bowl, the shuttle connects to the West Berkeley shuttle, which again is a standalone contract with some of the property owners in Berkeley that have asked the TMA to operate the shuttle on their behalf. They have their own buses, their own personnel. The TMA administers that for them, but it's not part of the service that is paid for by property owners in Emeryville. Another new stop is with the turnaround now happening at the marina on the peninsula. There's a new stop at the marina now. I think Public Works is still working with the TMA to put in the stop sign and a bench, but the bus does stop there now, but soon you'll be able to see where it stops because the sign will be placed along the bench. And I know that that's been something, a lot of interest to people ever since AC Transit eliminated service to the peninsula, probably about 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now. So the organization of the Emery Go Round is that it is administered by the Emeryville Transportation Management Association, which consists of all the property owners that pay into the Special Assessment District. In turn, they contract the administration of the service to Gray Bowen, and Ronnie is a representative of Gray Bowen. And the service itself is done through MV Transportation Incorporated, which is a national bus company. Previously, it was San Francisco SF Airporter that operated the shuttle, but for the past maybe 2-3 years, it has been MV Transportation. And because this has come up, I will say that the personnel under MV Transportation, as it was the case also when it was SF Airporter that ran the shuttle, are unionized and they are part of the Teamsters. Some governance. A special assessment district that's done under the Streets and Highway Code that meant that the state has for the property-based business improvement district is very clear that the governance of whatever services are funded through that special assessment district should be administered and decisions should be made by those that pay into the assessment. And so the law calls for an owner's representative to represent the owners, the property owners that pay into the shuttle. And this role for the citywide property-based business improvement district is vested in the Transportation Management Association, which consists of all the property owners that pay into the shuttle. The TMA is the owner's representative under the PBID law, and it is a role, as I said, established by the PBID law and then enshrined in the PBID management plan, which is the document that includes all the services, the assessment formulas, and governance, for example, that governs that particular special assessment district. And that management plan actually goes to a ballot vote of the parcel owners that are being asked to pay for the district. And then the TMA has bylaws that govern how the board is in fact elected and what their role is. So this city has a contract with the TMA. The state laws around PBID say that the city shall contract with the owner's representative, and for those of you that are familiar with state law, the state doesn't use the word shall lightly. It's not a maybe or silent, it's shall. And the TMA has the authority to determine the shuttle service levels, routes, and stops. The TMA also develops the annual budget and makes recommendations based upon that budget for the annual levy within the confounds of the formula that is enshrined in the management plan. So right now, it's no more than 5% in a given year. And typically, I think over the, I guess about the 15 years or so that there has been an assessment district in place, on average, it's been about a 2.7% increase per year to date. The city's role is that it has general oversight responsibility over the Transportation Management Association and the PBID. Because the assessment district appears on the property rolls, the city has the responsibility of preparing those property rolls and conveying those to the county, which collects the assessment through the property taxes, remits that amount of money to the city, who then, because of the shall clause in the law, then provides those funds to the TMA for the operation of the shuttle. And those funds can only be used for those services that are enumerated in the management plan, which in this case is Emery Go Round shuttle, as well as other transportation, alternative transportation measures. In practice, other than, there's really only been funds for the shuttle, but it does provide for other types of alternative transportation programs, like a bike share or something like that, also to be funded through this mechanism. But to date, that's not been the case, and the budgets have not included. So the city does approve the overall annual TMA budget and approves the annual assessment levy, but these are based on the recommendation of the TMA. Okay? And the city's role really is very limited in terms of decision making. The city really can't do much other than not approve a budget, not approve an assessment levy, which would essentially mean no service, since the city can't contract with anyone else or use the money for any other purposes. And under the current law, the city also cannot disestablish the district without the concurrence of those that pay in. So that bit of a change. Yes.
So how's this presentation going to be structured? Are you going to run through everything and then have questions, or can we ask questions during the process?
If someone has a clarification question, I could take it now, but if it's a more elaborate, I'd rather wait to the end, because it may in fact be that I will address it as part of my presentation. So maybe I can go through it really quickly and see if I've answered those questions. So the Emery Go Round origins. And again, for some of you here, you might know some of this. So the Emery Go Round was really started as a private-public partnership in 1994. It was really a city initiative. At this point, for those of you that have been in Emeryville for more than 20 years, it was the very beginning of the redevelopment of the city. At the time, there were some independent shuttles that were paid for by some private property owners. I think the Watergate Towers had a shuttle. Maybe the Market Group had a shuttle. There were a few businesses that did have shuttles, but they only served the employees or the tenants of that building. There were, at this time in '94, it was another round of deep service cutbacks for AC Transit. And with the number of projects that were kind of come to the fore, this was actually when, those of you remember when Kaiser was going to come to Emeryville perhaps, that the city was really looking at citywide traffic mitigation measures. And really for traffic mitigation, you're really talking about mitigating those trips generated by the project that is being asked for approval, not a citywide shuttle. So at the time, the city proposed to 8 major developers or commercial property owners that we would do a 3-year experiment to do a shuttle. And that as part of that, all the independent shuttles would shut down, and essentially those property owners would use those funds toward the Emery Go Round, and that the city would pay, starting with the first year, about half the cost of the shuttle, and if it was successful after 1 year, then would work with the developers to get to the place where the shuttle would be, expectation was 100% privately funded. And for those first 3 years, the city administered the shuttle directly. There was some redevelopment funds that were used to pay for half the shuttle as a startup project. Redevelopment funds could not be used for ongoing services, but could be used for startup. And the idea was at the end of 3 years, the city would have worked with some of these major property owners, commercial property owners, to establish a nonprofit that could take over the shuttle itself. So the first year, the city ended up paying about 60% of the operating costs. We did have some grant money to help us with that. Most of it was redevelopment funds, as I said. And by the end of year 3, 90% of the shuttle was privately funded. Much of it was through volunteers. And so then, in 1997, the TMA was established as a nonprofit. The city worked to establish that through a Caltrans grant. And the TMA assumed the administration of the Emery Go Round. During this time period, from 97 to 2001, the TMA membership expanded to 17. And this was a mix of developer agreements and voluntary contributions. The TMA board consisted of all members that paid into the TMA. So the 17 that you saw there were all on the board of directors. And they institutionalized payment through a membership participation agreement among themselves. There was very minimal city financial contribution at this time, no more than 10%. And the city had a liaison to the board, which was me, with no voting rights. And this was a period that you began to see great expansion in the ridership demand and capacity. And in fact, when I said that the first 3 years, we were looking at what success would look like. And what success was defined as if after a year of service, if there was at least 40% increase in ridership over the existing independent shuttles, that would be considered success, and we would continue on with this process. Well, that 40% more than the existing shuttles, independent shuttles, was made the first week that the shuttle was operated. So 2001 was when the first property-based business improvement district was established. It was really in a recognition of increased ridership demand that far outstripped anything that mitigation could probably be able to justify based upon trip generation from the commercial properties themselves that were being assessed at the time. And the TMA and the city reviewed various funding options. And after discussion, that was a council level discussion as well as a discussion within the TMA decided to request that the city establish a property-based business improvement district. And so the businesses that were part of the TMA worked with other businesses to submit a petition for the city to establish a special assessment district. And it was developed by an independent engineer's report. So one of the things about a special assessment district is that those that pay are doing so because they derive a special benefit. So if it was an underground utilities district, that meant that you actually are, the utilities in front of your block are undergrounded as opposed to you lived in another neighborhood that didn't get that special benefit. So it's really based upon special benefit. And as you will see, is that over the years, that has really been defined more narrowly and more stringently because of lawsuits. So the original bid was based upon 17 cents per square foot for commercial properties, and that is 8.5 cents per structural square foot for industrial properties. And at this time, no residential properties were assessed through the district. However, the city did begin putting conditions of approval on some condominiums. And the TMA board during this time was established by the TMA, who adopted bylaws, in which it was the 7 top assessed commercial property owners as well as a Chamber of Commerce representative that were on the board. And for any of the developers that had conditions of approval, they were considered fulfilled as long as the P-bid was in place. There are a few that during this time were what we call direct build. So for example, the East Bay Bridge Shopping Center where Target and Pack and Save is, that development, when it was established, a third of the property is in Oakland, 2/3 of it's in Emeryville. So those properties like the Pack and Save that are in Emeryville paid through the Special Assessment District. But through the agreement for that project, those properties that were part of the original joint powers agreement with Oakland, so like the Target, actually paid as well. But they paid through a direct bill. It's obviously not on their property rolls because we can't put, Emeryville can't put assessments on an Oakland property roll. So the first P-bid by statute could only be for 5 years. The statute changed, and for the renewal that happened in 2006, it was done for 10 years. And in 2006, the new P-bid law was changed, and P-bids could include rental housing as well as live work, except for in residentially zoned areas. The TMA board membership was expanded to include one property owner at large and one direct build housing representative. And as I said, it was for 10 years. So during this current P-bid is where you see some of the, you see the rental, the housing rental properties have pay into the P-bid. And as I said, you continue to see condominiums be requested to contribute through their conditions of approval. So exactly what is the citywide P-bid? I've alluded to this, so I'll go through this very quickly, and if you have questions, I'll be glad to answer those after the fact. So it's a special assessment district, and the assessment levy is determined by an engineer's report of what the special benefit is. So this has been something that's become more rigorous as time has gone on, as there have been some lawsuits. And so now, when we're looking at extending it, it really is going to be based upon the trips generated according to a land use and the accessibility to the service, not the actual use, but accessibility. So for example, if you generate 100 trips per day, your assessment is going to be based on the special benefit of what, if you could essentially take those 100 trips and put them on the Emery Go Round. Now, of course, tenants change. You might have no tenants, let's say, who use the Emery Go Round 1 year and every single one the other year. But your accessibility to that service remains the same, whether or not you actually have use or not. One thing that's interesting right now is that currently 1/3, 30% during the weekday and 32% on the weekend of all riders live in Emeryville. This was not true when the system first started. And in fact, we've seen one of the biggest gains in midday service and in residential use of the service. So, as I said, that it's an annual levy that's collected through the property tax rolls. In order to establish or renew a P-bid, it requires a Proposition 218 ballot process, which means that every property owner that could be assessed is sent a ballot. And the ballot is a protest vote based, which means of the ballots that are submitted, if less than 50% say no, then the parcel owners have been deemed as to have essentially not struck down the assessment district. And then the city council then may establish the district. If there was 50% plus one of those ballots that were returned based upon the assessment being paid said no, then the city council could not consider establishing a P-bid. So a protest vote that quote fails, that less than a majority said no, means that the city may, but still needs to do a public hearing and still has to take the action to approve the assessment district. However, if a majority said no, then the city council would not be able to act. So the current PBID assessment is currently a little over 26 cents per square foot for office retail. It's half that, or a little over 13 cents per 1,000 square foot of building for industrial warehouse. And then for the rental residential, it's $130.89. And for those properties, either commercial, industrial, or condominium or homeowning units that receive direct bills, it's the same fee, just collected differently. And right now, there's only those 3 different kinds of rental units. The PBID that we're looking at now will be much more fine-grained based upon the more rigor that's being asked now to be more specific about varying degrees of special benefit.
Is that 130 per condo a year?
Per condo per year.
Per year.
Well, yes, or, but that's what it is now. I will tell you now that as, right now, the office retail is being more fine-grained. So there'll be different categories for, let's say, banks or large, let's say, big box home furnishings. Anyone can figure out what I'm talking about? Or retail versus office, right? Because before it was one big category, but when you start looking at trip generation, it's actually not the same for those kinds of uses, so it'll be more fine-grained. Similarly for residents, right now there's only the one category, and our assessment engineer is now looking at making it into 3 categories: single family, multi-family, and condos. And they're all slightly different. And again, it's based upon the trip reduction, the trip generation, and that's drawn from transportation planning Bibles. For those of you who are planners, it's kind of, so there's engineers handbooks, there's planner handbooks, which is the normally accepted way of marking what the number of trips would be generated.
Question.
Yes.
Is that everybody in a condo would pay the same thing?
Yes.
Regardless of size?
Yes. Yes. It's based upon one unit. It's not broken down any further by square feet.
So if you also are a condo owner and you also have another home in Emeryville, you pay twice?
You pay per parcel because each parcel is deriving the benefit of having access to the service, which one means that you could be you might be not taking that trip and instead using the Emery Go Round, or the fact that it is available in front of your property has increased the property value, and it is there for you to use as you choose or not to choose. So it's based upon the benefit that the parcel gains, and that is differential based upon the use of that parcel. So, one of these big box furnishing stores generates a lot of trips. So they are determined to get a lot of, potential benefit, because it's the access that is that it's based upon.
Just to be clear, that what you're showing here on this screen is the current PBID and not the proposal that's been
Yes.
voted on, so everyone understands
Right.
that.
And I will say that I'm still back and forth a little bit to understand the engineer's assumptions. It is an objective process, so we can't kind of dictate kind of their findings, but you can try to work with them to refine their assumptions and to bring things into their assumptions that maybe they did not know. At this point, it looks like that condos would be under $100 a year per unit.
How much?
Would be, so what I'm looking at now is that this would be at the high side for condominiums, that this would be more than condominiums pay. Yes.
Can you make it bigger or clearer or something?
What I can do is
Try it, using turning off that row will help.
Not intended for you to see.
A little better.
What I was saying is that right now, there's only 3 different fees. One is for all commercial office retail space, and that is 26.2 cents per structural square feet. Then for industrial warehouse, it's 13.1 cents per structure, for 1,000 structural, sorry, I'll do it per 1,000. So for office retail, it's $262 per 1,000 square feet. For industrial warehouse, it's $131 per 1,000 square feet. And for residential units, which now are only those that are rental, or those condominiums that have a conditions of approval placed upon it, it's $130.89. Now, as I said, that one right now, the assessment engineer is saying that in their transportation planning Bible, there's a difference between the number of trips that a single family home produces, a condo, multifamily produces, and a rental produces. And so they are looking at a slightly different per unit fee for those types of uses. And that for the condos is less than that now. It's actually the most for single family, and then condominium and multifamily are more the same.
Excuse me, but this is a proposal that goes on that ballot, right?
No,
This is what exists now. And the way I have this is that I don't have the final engineer's report, which would be the basis for the proposal. So just to give people an idea of, we're not taking $500, just to give people a context of what's being paid now.
Would you
this,
tell us approximately when we will get that report, and that might clarify it?
I'm hoping to have something, maybe for the April 7th City Council, no, I'm not, probably not for that one. In April, mid-April.
Excuse me. So how is that collected today? Is it, I don't see it on my property taxes. Is it charged directly to Watergate? And
Because right now, Watergate does not pay at all.
We don't have any, right?
Watergate does not pay at all. But if the extended P-bid was to pass, including residential property owners, then for condominiums, it would appear on your parcel tax. But everyone gets a chance to vote on it. So to give you a little sense in terms of who pays for what now, because I know that has been raised. But right now you see that the lion's share of who is paying into the TMA for the Emery Go right now are the retail, office, and mixed-use parcels. And that is just under 80% of all the monies that are collected. This is based upon 2013. And then you see the next largest payers are the industrial warehouse parcels, a little over 10%. And then you see the rental apartment parcels at 5.6. So if you see right now, the residential parcels that are paying is equivalent to a little over 6% of the total assessment that's being paid to fund the Emery Go Round. And as I said, right now residents are just under a third of all the writers. And I will say that looking at what I've seen so far in a prediction of what residents would pay, it's unlikely to be more than 20% of the entire assessment district from what I've seen to date. Though the city contribution will probably go up. And that is because that now, before, the law did not really require that much rigor to determine what is special benefit versus what is general benefit. And you could only charge those in the assessment, you could only levy an assessment for those in the district on special benefit. So for example, we know, we just did a ridership study in January, that about 5% of riders neither get on the shuttle in Emeryville or get off the shuttle in Emeryville. I was very surprised at the number of people who get on at MacArthur Bar, it's about 90 a day, and get off at 40th and San Pablo, evidently to take AC Transit somewhere else. For all I know, they live near the MacArthur BART station and figured it out how you get to Fort Haven and San Pablo to transfer. We also have people who we've seen who get on at MacArthur BART and get off at the West Berkeley Bowl, ostensibly to go into Berkeley. And so those are all general benefits. You cannot assign that to any parcel in Emeryville because it's, they're stopping at or dropping anybody off. And so the assessment engineer has a way of determining what that number is. There's a few other things they look at. That was just an example of the 5%. And say, okay, this is general benefit. This we cannot assign to any land use within the district. Therefore, that service may not be needed. You can't really take that service part off, but that cannot be funded through the assessment district. It's kind of taken off the top, and that needs to be funded by another means, either through city general fund or through grants or any other way but the assessment district. So in the past few years, costs have exceeded revenues, though mainly because of fuel costs, an aging fleet. The current service has these cutaway buses that really aren't that durable, so not only do they have to be replaced more frequently, but they tend to have more maintenance than you see kind of like the regular size kind of heavy duty buses. And increased ridership. Even during the worst of the recession, the Emery Go Round ridership stayed even, while transit systems all around us plummeted. And we think because of the convenience and frequency, we had a lot of people, as maybe their finances were lower and fuel costs were going up, made that mode shift to do public transit in the Emery Go Round rather than the shuttle. And you can imagine, 1.7 million trips per year. Think about those trips if the shuttle didn't exist, and in fact, those were cars going through our city. So there's more and more demand to be able to do something other than drive through Emery Go Round. And quite frankly, if not another inch of space was developed either for housing or for businesses, I believe that the shuttle would continue to rise in ridership. And as we see, more and more we see residents, and certainly I've known people who moved to Emeryville and realized you don't really need a car. Between the Emery Go Round, bicycling, and car share, you could live in Emeryville and really not own your own car. So for this year, and potentially for next year, the team has actually asked the city to make up the difference to be able to maintain the quality of service. And we've seen that with DC Transit, that to meet that because you can't meet the cost of increased ridership, you cut back, you reduce service, and then of course ridership starts dying. People go back into their cars because they don't want to wait half an hour for a shuttle, but they'll wait 10 minutes for a shuttle. And so to date, it's been policy of the TMA and supported by the city to try to keep the quality of the service. So it will include, it can continue to be an attractive service.
How often does the City of Emeryville bus go around? I mean, if people wanted to walk down to catch the bus, how long would you be waiting for the bus?
It depends on the time of the day and the route, anywhere from about 7 to 10 minutes to 20.
No more than 15.
Usually not more than 15. And there's a lot of studies that show that once it gets more to be about 15 minutes, people start dying off in terms of, I just missed it, I'm not going to wait half an hour. So this is to give you, these numbers just got adjusted, but they're still pretty close in terms of what the projection was for the cost of the Emery Go Round. And you can see that there is a deficit. Right now, it's being paid by a combination of going into the TMA's reserves, which are really the only monies that they have to buy new buses. So that's not something that can be done forever. And asking for the city to be able to provide some funds. So the city provided $400,000 for this year and next. If the PBID does not go forward, does not pass, then there are funds to continue the service through the end of next year, and that would be all. Almost done. So the current PBID, as I said, sunsets in fiscal year 2015, 2016, with funds to complete the service through next year. The city is recommending for the PBID renewal process to occur a year early. One, because of the deficit, but also to make sure that you kind of want to know before 6 months before the service ends whether you've got money or not. The residential household would be included on the basis of the assessment engineer finding that residential parcels do receive a special benefit, like commercial properties. It would help address the budget shortfall based upon the actual assessment that we're still determining, but we think will be about $600,000 in additional. It's probably not additional. It's probably about $400,000 additional. It would address equity issues between rental versus homeowner housing. It would address the issues that now the condominiums that are rented out, which they would be subject, because if you have you're supposed to have a business license, if you're a landlord, on the basis of having a commercial license, then you would be you are now in the rental housing business and therefore should be assessed. But it's very difficult, as you can well imagine, to be able to track every condo as it goes from homeowner to rental status and back. So we wouldn't have to worry about that. And would provide for residential representation and decision making, because now being a formal part of the assessment district, the governance would have to include residential representation in a way that it has not had to date, because residents by and large, whose homeowning residents, have not been part of the assessment district. So this proposed schedule, I think it's my second to last slide. I didn't put here the fact that, what I put here were those things that are either at a city council meeting or were at City Hall. So we've had two community meetings already, the 9th and the 21st. This is the first one, are going to be going out to different neighborhoods and homeowners association to provide information. We will likely do it particularly for Watergate twice. Right now, as I said, we don't have the proposal as it will be going to the ballot. So once we have that information, we'll probably do another informational session for Watergate if you would like me to come back on more details. And there'll be a council study session on May 19th. And we expect we will have a draft management plan of what we will be asking the parcel owner to consider on May 19th. June 2nd would be the council meeting that the proposed PBID would go to council for their approval to be able to then be distributed in ballots starting June 5th. And it's a 45-day process by which people can return those ballots. And then July 21st would be when we open the ballots and count them. And that will be done, we will open the ballots on July 21st. It's 45 days for parcel owners to get those ballots in. On the 21st, we'll open those ballots. We'll do that in, those of you who know, there's like a side room by the council chambers. We'll be doing it there. It's open to the public. Anyone who wants to view the vote can do so. There will then, after the vote, we'll come to the city council and tell them what the vote is. If the vote is such that the PBID could go forward, there'll be a public hearing, which is another opportunity for people to weigh in on the proposed assessment district. And at the end of that, considering the vote, assuming that it's a yes, because if it's a no, then the council can't consider anything. And also considering what is said at the public hearing, then the council would act to approve the district or not. And if the council approves the district on July 21st, then staff would be working with our management firm or our consulting firm to ready the property rolls by August 10th, which is the deadline for getting everything to the county. And then it would be on the the fiscal year 15-16 property rolls, which I think come in December. Do they come in December? Excuse me? Yeah, when they're due. Questions?
Okay, I'd like just to ask everybody in the audience that, for the courtesy of everyone else in the audience, why don't you come up to this microphone and use it to ask your questions? And since I have it in my hand, I'll go first. That's the power of the voice.
Chair's prerogative.
Yeah. So to begin with, one of the statements you made was that the assessment was going to be based upon the number of trips that the bus goes down, whichever route.
Not exactly.
Not exactly, but, all right, so perhaps you can go into a little more detail about how that assessment is determined?
There is an assessment engineer that needs to be able to get the nexus of what the special benefit is. And so it has to be some objective analytical basis that you can determine it. And it's based upon access, not actual use. So, for example, if a building is vacant, it would still be assessed because the access is still there. That next, that same building in a week, let's say in 2 months is fully tenanted, maybe with 20% of ridership. The access is still the same. And then if it's 100% tenanted and 100% using, the access is still the same. So the assessment engineer right now is looking at trip generation by land use as a way of getting at what the access to the special benefit is. And that will vary according to the land use. So a bank generates more trips than a regular office space because they have customers. So certain businesses generate more trips than others, and certain types of residences generate more trips than others. And so that's the objective basis that he's going to be looking at. As well as if there were any differences in access based upon geographic, that would be based upon 1/4 mile to a stop. But given, as you saw that map, pretty much, there's very few, if any, parcels that are not within 1/4 mile of a stop.
And how was that measured?
Excuse me?
How was that measured about the number of
Trips?
usage for each particular stop? So you said as an example.
Per parcel.
Per parcel, I'm sorry. Per parcel.
It's based upon the land use. So if you have square footage that is a bank, then you look at your
Oh, so there's some sort of.
transportation planning Bible and
Okay,
it
there's some
says
sort of
X.
table that they're reading, okay.
Yes.
And then my next question, then I'll turn it over. My next question is that the city of Emeryville doesn't have direct management over the TMA, but it does approve the budget. What measure does it request of the TMA to understand that the budget that's been submitted has some veracity to it? I mean, from the perspective of what accountability is the city of Emeryville asking of the TMA to say, you're coming to me for 2.8 million, or you're coming to me for 3.5 million, okay? Which I being the city council, will, put into the next assessment, next year, whatever. What am I, city council, asking of the TMA to effectively explain where that 2.5, 3.5, whatever $1 million came from?
Well,
Thank you.
first of all, the city's liaison to the TMA, which is me, I attend pretty much every board meeting. And of course, the development of the budget is part of the agenda of the TMA board. TMA board, it's an interesting thing under state law that even though it's a private nonprofit company, that it is subject to the Brown Act under the PBID law, that the owners association that represents the property owners that pay into the district, those meetings, when they meet to discuss anything having to do with the assessment district, are open to the public. And I've certainly seen, should I call you out, Betsy and Joyce? Do come regularly, so there is that we are there at the meetings as the budget's being discussed. In addition, the TMA board obviously consists of the largest contributors to the assessment district, so they have a vested interest in making sure that the budget is based upon the needs of the service and the needs of the ridership. Also, the district is audited every single year. It's kind of a two-pronged audit. One, that the fund itself is audited, that the city keeps through as we audit all the city funds. And also there's an independent audit of the TMA itself. So there is an audit that is done. Also, whenever there is a budget that is qualitatively different than the year before, certainly that's discussed at the board meeting. So it's either because there's a need to replace buses or to meet ridership capacity or fuel costs. So all of that is discussed at the meetings. It is included in the director's report and it's part of the information that staff has. So when the budget does go to council, we have all that knowledge to be able to support that the budget is adequate. And also, no funds that are collected from the assessment district can be used for any other purpose. So if there was a year, which happens sometimes, that maybe buses are bought later in the year than was budgeted for, those monies go into the cash reserve of the TMA, and they can only be used to support those services that are outlined in the management plan.
Hi. I would like to discuss the money.
Say it loud.
I'm interested about taxation without representation. AC Transit, which you indicated earlier in your talk, quit serving us in 1994. And every year we have an assessment on our tax bills to pay AC Transit. Why can't, number one, why can't that money go to contribute to our deficit here? Because that's what we're paying for, and AC Transit gives us nothing. That's one thing. And I think there's about 1,300 parcels west of the freeway that all suffer the same taxation without representation. Secondly, if AC Transit is in the bus business, why don't they take over Emery Go Round and run it more efficiently, because they're already set up to do it, and cut out all these administrative expenses and save us a few bucks. And then thirdly, why is there more austerity in the operation of the Emery Go Round? I see buses following one another here, coming 2 and 3 at a time, and then people wait long periods of time. We don't need that frequency of service. And the people here, if they get a schedule that they know it's going to run every half hour or something, some reasonable amount of time, it'll satisfy us. We don't have to have a bus every 10 or 12 minutes looking at a timetable. So those are topics that I was hoping to hear about tonight when I came here, and we got a history lesson. So I'm interested in the money, and I'd like to throw that open for discussion. I think there's a lot of people here who are also interested in the money. Yeah, okay, so that's what I'm thinking a little bit. Help me.
Typically, the Emery Go Round is what's called a last mile service, which is essentially taking passengers from where a mass transit provider like AC Transit or BART stops, kind of close to their house, right? Mass transit, kind of by definition, aren't meant to be tailored to very specific needs. So the Emery Go Round, for example, goes into the Watergate towers, does stops where the AC Transit does not, has service that varies according to demand. If you have some ideas on how to make a more efficient service, I'm sure Ronnie would love to hear it. These are all things that generally need a lot more rapid turnaround time than a mass transit service has. For those of you who ride AC Transit, you maybe are familiar with how long it takes to have any change in service, whether good or reduction the AC Transit has. In terms of the cost of running the service, believe you me, if AC Transit ran the service, it would cost far more than the Emery Go Round shuttle. Their direct costs are more, and their administrative and overhead costs are way more than the Emery Go Round shuttle. And in fact, when the shuttle was originally founded back in '94, AC Transit was asked to bid on the shuttle, and the response that we received was, I would call it not responsive. Lastly, what you said about the buses bundling up, again, you can talk to Ronnie about that, but unfortunately, when you have a mainline railroad going between your town and the Powell Street Bridge being backed up, not to mention some of just the cross-traffic congestion, that happens. You see that with AC Transit buses too, that you'll see. It's just not a perfect science. You plan it a certain way, but it does. But something can happen, and all of a sudden you see buses, being stacked up. Believe me, it's as frustrating for the riders and for the administration as it is for those that see it. But certainly, if there are, if analysis warrants a reduction of service during parts of the day or in different routes, the Emery Go Round is definitely interested in being able to cut those costs. And one thing that residential representation of the board could do is probably maybe have a deeper discussion on the midday service.
Hold your microphone.
Oh, sorry. So residential representation as part of the TMA would allow for more specific discussion on maybe where some economies could be made while keeping the integrity of the service.
I should just add,
Yes.
sorry, I should add also to that, during the peak frequency periods where there's commute traffic, there's actually 2 routes serving this area.
Exactly.
There's a Watergate Express, which runs from the freeway, and then there's the local, exactly, which is why you're seeing that trail of buses come through at that given time.
Yeah, express bus or power bus.
Exactly.
There's nothing like,
No, there's nothing like taxes to bring up growth, is there? Just following up on that, I sent you an email about a year ago, I think, Ronnie, when the city was debating how much it was going to contribute to make up the deficit regarding the midday use of the buses being very poor or low occupancy. And have you done anything to mitigate that?
So what we have now is we reduce frequency during the midday to approximately 15. You want to go there?
Yeah, you should, yeah.
Yeah, we have to speak to the microphone up here.
And
That way everyone has the
introduce her,
benefit of your
please.
wisdom. Yeah.
I'm Ronnie Hattra. To answer your question, the reason why, what we did to save on costs is we have midday service no more than 15 minutes. So what we've determined is that a reliable bus service, given any time of day, needs to have no more than a 15-minute service frequency. So we have a 15-minute during the off-peak direction or off-peak service hours, which is probably before 6 o'clock during the midday and then later in the evening, late hours. And then during the peak time, we have approximately 10-minute frequency, 10 to 15-minute frequency. So we have reduced service to meet the 15-minute kind of frequency demand, and we really do not run empty buses a whole lot. So we keep close track of our ridership, and we try to shift resources however best we can.
All right, let's talk about
I
the,
think there's really, people don't seem to understand, there's an iPhone app or a smartphone app. You can tell exactly when the bus is going to be down there. It's fantastic. You just walk down, 3-minute walk, and the bus is there. You can park or park. It's a fantastic, AC should be so lucky with AC Transit.
But it's not
I didn't hear
accurate.
what he said.
It is. The iPhone app works great.
Excuse me.
Well,
so, point of order. Okay. The fact that it's now being proposed that residents be added to this is due to the feeling or the economic demands upon the business community that they do not want to make up for the deficit, and that if the residents are not included, we run the risk of the service being terminated? Is that
I would say
correct
that it more comes
interpretation?
from a place that it's a special assessment district. And unless you can argue that residents do not derive any special benefit from the service, then you really legally should include residents in the assessment district. I'll give you the example of what's happened in some of the downtown assessment districts that some of you may be familiar with, when the Downtown Merchants Association essentially taxes itself to get like more, to get banners and maybe security patrol and steam clean the sidewalks. Well, it used to be that only businesses were assessed under, it's the same law really that allows you to assess for the Emery Go Round. But then it was looked at, well, if there's a business on the ground floor, but apartments or condos on the top floor, how can you say that those residents aren't also receiving that benefit of the cleaner sidewalks, the added security, the more lights? And so therefore, constitutionally, you have to be able to, that anyone who's receiving a similar special benefit should both be paying. Similarly now with parcel taxes, and this recently happened with Alameda, that now with parcel taxes, including school parcel taxes, it used to be that commercial parcels were oftentimes at a different tax rate than residential parcels, just because. Mostly because the voters vote and the businesses didn't. And that has been overturned now. And actually the city of Alameda ended up having to refund money to businesses because of this idea that you cannot just arbitrarily distinguish between who's receiving a benefit for a service.
Is this related, Doug? I'm going to finish up just this stream of thought. So we're going to have a lot of development coming into Emeryville. A lot of new businesses, a lot of new projects being developed. Has the city done any projections as to whether, or the TMA, as to whether that would be an adequate new infusion of capital, that perhaps this new renewal could be of a shorter time period, and then we could determine whether businesses' revenue would be adequate to make up for the shortfall?
Well, one thing is that an assessment district's levy can always be reduced. I mean, just because you can doesn't mean that it needs to be increased or even kept the same. And one thing, now that we're a charter city, one of the powers that we have now over the only thing that charter dealt with was taxation and revenue, is that that the council is saying that the council has the ability to disestablish any assessment district for any reasons. So for example, with the talk about the regional Emeryville, Berkeley, Oakland transportation system, the EBOT, if that was funded for kind of part of the East Bay that's west of San Pablo, and that was funded through some regional mechanism, well, that could be a reason to disestablish the district, because what the Emery Go Round is doing now through the PBID would be done through some other mechanism. So there's always the opportunity to be able to reduce the assessment or even to end the assessment district even before it's statutory end if circumstances change.
Okay, last question and then I'll finish. Is the current assessment is based on square footage?
Yes.
Now, is that defined by law? In other words, we have some very large corporations, like Pixar and Novartis and Cliff Bar movie, and I don't know how many. But really, the usage is tied to people, not floor space. And could it not be based also on the number of employees as opposed to the number of square footage? You could have an empty warehouse that's paying more than a company with 250 people in a small office building.
It's based upon land use and the trips that are generated from that land use. One of the things that the assessment engineer has been saying is he has been looking at what industrial uses pay now, and he thinks that does need to come down because just the 10,000 square foot warehouse just doesn't generate as many trips as a 10,000 square foot office building, doctor's office, or store. And so therefore, the special benefit that a warehouse gets is less and should be levied less. And so there's, I think, while we had 3 different kind of categories in the PBIDs to date, I think we're probably now looking at more like 15 different categories to really fine grain what that accessibility is. And it really is based upon access, because even if you have an office building that's fully tenanted, from year to year, the number of people in that building that actually use that shuttle, it varies based upon, do they live near BART? If you don't live near BART, you're probably not going to take, you may not take the Emery Go Round. But in the next year, your tenant mix in your building changes and, twice as many people. And so it's really based upon the accessibility of that land use and the number of land uses, trips that are generated that theoretically could be met through the service. So you're right, quite honestly, some of the land uses you think, well, who would actually use the Emery Go Round in reality? But the fact that they can or could is what the assessment is based upon.
Okay, I have a question. I would like to see the city council make, if it does pass, and it is in the city, that a condition be that TMA purchase clean buses going forward and retire buses if they can and get clean buses, because the pollution that's created out on Powell Street is obnoxious. It just comes into the units. It's crazy.
I know that's something that has come up, and that is probably one of the prime areas that the TMA with city support will be looking at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Alameda County Transportation Commission to be able to get capital to be able to purchase new buses. The cost of green technology buses are quite more than the buses that are being used now. Doesn't mean that that's not where the service should be going.
Well, this is supposed to be a green city.
True, well,
And-
either
and-
up the assessment to cover that cost or get the grants to be able to
And you know
provide.
that West Oakland residents had to sue the Port of Oakland and the truckers to get clean devices put on all the semi-trucks. So, it needs to happen. Now, also, this 1.7 million figure of ridership, is that independently audited?
No, I would say that it is based upon the survey that the drivers take once a year. But for the ridership survey that looked at kind of the patterns of use that was done in January, that was an independent company that did that particular survey. But I would say that 1.7 is in line with past surveys in terms of, the year before it was 1.6, the year before it was 1.5. So it is in line with, I would say it's supported by anecdotal information that it's not out of line given what we've seen the trends over the past years.
Okay, but the trend is based on audited results or not?
It's based upon the drivers doing off and on counts. And then for the one in January, it was done by an independent surveyor that took a sample. And that also, I would say, supported that the drivers' counts are statistically what the survey found to be true.
Is that survey independently published somewhere?
I have just received the final draft, so it's not been kind of presented to the council, but as soon as it will be part of what is used to support the PBID, so it is something that the public can receive.
So how would we get that? When would we know about it?
As soon as Karen Hemohill, as the contract manager for that study, signed off on it, that it is accepted on a step level, then it is
Can I give you my email address?
Sure, you can send it to me, that would be great. But I assume that that's going to be available in the next week or so. I said there's just a few things that I want to make sure. I had asked for some additional slicing and dicing of the ridership information. They came up with this figure about, as I said, the pass-through trips. And so my question was, well, do we know when they're getting on? Do we know when they're getting off? So I'm kind of at that stage of approving the report, just making sure that there's nothing that I want to see added before I say that it's the final.
So maybe a couple of weeks.
Yeah, at most.
And then lastly, will there be absentee ballots for the?
No, it is all vote by mail. All the ballots be sent by mail to the addressed owner of the parcel.
So what if you're on vacation?
Yeah.
You have 45 days to turn it in, so
Okay.
we're always so lucky to get a 45
That's
day
why it's
vacation.
critical, if you rent properties here and you haven't changed your mailing address, your renter's gonna get the ballot and they can't vote.
Hi, thank you for being here, and I appreciate your staff members coming. I'm 68, I'm a real estate agent, I sold 200 properties here, I rented out 800, I've owned 12 of them here, and in the last couple of years, this is over 18 years, I'm seeing the city go for more and more money for parcel owners or owners, or whatever you want to call it. It's very disturbing. Since it became a city charter, I don't think most of the owners know that. When you sell a property here now, you're going to pay from $3,000 to $6,000 for the city transfer tax we didn't have. So my suggestion, the Emery Go, the Emery Go Round is a great service. I've used it 5 times in 18 years. My son uses it. Many people use it. I think it's a wonderful service. That's not the problem. The problem is who's going to pay. Everybody loves it for one reason: it's free. We have thousands of people who come to Emeryville to work. I rent to people making $100,000 to $150,000 a year as renters. They're not in the city because they don't want to pay the prices over here. They love the free shuttle. Charge the people, charge the riders. Have senior citizens free, get an ID card or city residents, and just pay the price. It's very simple, it's not complicated. We're tired of paying out of pocket every time something comes up. I have to have a license as a realtor, I have a license as a landlord, and every time I turn around, somebody wants more money. It's just not right. So I'm not happy with the charter system. The prices never go down. That's not the way government works. So if you can express that to the mayor, it's not, we don't appreciate your service, but parcel owners is the last deep pocket and the small business owners. So thank you very much.
I will just mention that something that I think has not been said in a while is that when the redevelopment agency was eliminated, as redevelopment agencies were eliminated throughout the state, the city lost almost half of its operational income. And so when you lose half of the income that you used to receive through property taxes that were already being collected, and you have a constituency that still wants to have the quality of services that Emeryville has had, then as a city council, your choices are limited in how you continue to pay for that same level of services when you had a major funding source eliminated. And so I think, this is something that was said at the time, that the elimination of redevelopment will mean some difficult choices in terms of either reducing services that are provided to Emeryville community, or finding alternative ways of raising revenue to be able to keep those services. And I think that this is the discussion that's happening now.
Since we're changing the paradigm and business is no longer paying for bus service uniquely as it was and getting concessions through planning, et cetera, we're changing this to a whole different kind of bus and funding. So why not start charging? I mean, there's nothing to stop us from doing that, because it was free before because it made business because they provided it. They're not doing that anymore.
It's still a little.
To a degree, but we're
Well, yeah, they're
changing.
still gonna have an assessment. Just see it.
It'll be closer to 80%. Residential, as Karen said, will be around 20% from what they know now. So you don't want to double tax businesses, not only charge them 80%, but have the folks that work there pay a fare as well. And that's also expensive, right, Karen, to collect fares?
What I would say is that as part of the new governance, if the new PBID it does pass with residential representation, the governance of the shuttle can always decide to bring forth a proposal as part of their budget to be able to charge riders. And if that is something that, as those that are being assessed choose to do, that is something that they can bring forward. But I agree with you, Tim, that to date, this issue of double counting, the issue of the cost of the equipment, the concerns administratively with internal controls and collecting fares, Not to mention, it takes the time away from the shuttle run to be able to stop while someone is, looking for their pass card or looking for their coins. At the end of the day, right now, is seeing that what you would gain is offset by other issues. Now, that could change, and that could certainly be something that those that are represented in how the shuttle operates decides to change it.
Okay, well, let me just say, not what I was going to ask, but every time you collect a fare, you're encouraging somebody to get in a car, and boy, do we not need more cars on the street. So collecting fares would be a huge mistake. It would take a lot of time, cost a lot of money.
Let's not argue about it.
Anyway, but listen, once the PBID is assumed to be authorized to go forward, the proportion of money that in the assessment, who makes that choice? That is, how much is the proportion paid by the warehouse? How much is paid by the resident? How much is paid by the bank? Because because the votes are going to go, if it's the 9 people, the 8 people who are the largest owners, their incentive would be to reduce the amount of money they pay and to shift that cost to somebody else. So where's
The formula that's used is the independent assessment engineer, and that formula is institutionalized in the management plan that goes to the parcel owners for the ballot process. So the discretion of the TMA board in making a recommendation is it a 2% increase, a 3% increase, a 0% increase? They do not have the authority to change the mix, only the overall increase to all. That is based upon the assessment engineer's determination.
Thanks.
I just wondered, how are they going to assess, how are they going to determine how many people ride the bus? How do they ride our go-around bus? How do they determine that? Or how will they?
You and Doug sit down and answer.
The drivers count every morning. And then I think once a year, the drivers conduct a ridership survey, because there's lots of reasons why you want to know the ridership, including grants. And then just in January, rather than just relying upon the drivers as part of this extension process, the city obtained the services of an independent transportation consultant to do you okay? To do an on-board survey.
So excited by your presentation. Chair right here.
They did it on Thursday, and we're gonna get the results in a couple of weeks.
So, I mean, we don't know at this time how many people ride this bus to go around. Huh? We do?
In 1.7 million.
1.7
Is that what they
million
say? Okay.
last year.
All right. Well, that's fine. That's fine.
How many in here, just a question, will ride this bus? We're having just a talk here.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. I would too. Because in the first place, who knows, any day something could happen. You could use your car, or you wouldn't be able to, drive in and you catch the bus. So therefore, I think it is a great idea to have the bus, and whatever we have to pay, we don't know yet. But it's automatically taken out, I guess, out of the, what are they taking out of?
Property tax.
Property tax?
Every 6 months.
Huh? Are you right? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I answered that question.
I ride the Emery Go Round 5 days a week, and have been since I arrived here. I've ridden other buses in San Francisco and trains and on and on and on. So I want to make just a couple of points. First of all, I see the drivers count the passengers every time I get on the Emery Go Round. They've got a clicker, they've got a clipboard, they do this counting. They started this a few months ago. They are religious in counting the ridership. The Emery Go Round, to everybody's credit, is a good deal as a bus transportation service. So I'll say that positive comment. I sat through this presentation twice now. I was there at the board meeting a year ago. It's too long. It needs to be a shorter presentation. But I sat there a year ago when they cut the Emery Go Round service off. So my real concern here is the value that we derive as property owners to keep. So if I want to keep our assets up, if I want to rent my property, I want to be sure that we have a good transportation because that will attract renters. If I want to sell my property, I want to be sure that we have a good transportation system here because that will attract a quality new buyer. And that is extremely important to me. I don't want to see our assets and our desirability in this community go down because we don't have transportation available to us. So I'll end on the idea that I'd like to know more about this AC transit thing that I see on my tax bill, because we don't see any AC transit over here at all. I have to, I don't ride it at all because I have to go all the way over past Amtrak to get on it. And so I'd like to see people investigate why we are being assessed for AC transit, but I am not objecting. If I had to pay to ride this Emery Go Round, the proposed cost at $2 a ride would cost me $600 a year. I would be greatly opposed to that. In this old model that we're getting rid of, it would cost me $130 a year. I would rather pay $130 than pay the $600.
They can charge a quarter and it would offset the tax.
Anytime you're collecting fares, you have to have an infrastructure. You delay. The number of people that, it makes us all extremely impatient to have to deal with people who don't have the right pocket change and on and on and on.
Wow.
Betsy's going to explain the AC transit and why you can't roll back a voter-approved measure.
Yeah, that's it.
Why do we have to come down the hall?
Well, she'll explain.
The AC transit is a parcel tax that was voted on by the voters, I think, a couple of years ago, and it doesn't matter how close it is or whether you get bus service or not, it's just a parcel tax that the voters voted on in Alameda County, and I think part of Contra Costa County. So it isn't an assessment district.
And didn't they roll
Parcel
back
tax.
the service, Betsy, because of the lack of ridership on the peninsula?
Yes. One of the buses they did, one of the buses, I'm not really sure. The Y that went directly, there was a Y bus that came, I think there were 3 in the morning and 3 at night, and it was always full going into the city, and it was totally empty coming into, back to the East Bay, and at night it was the reverse. Nobody took it out of Emeryville, but the buses were full coming in. And so they tried manipulating the fares and making people pay higher fares on busy times, and it just didn't work. So
Kind of like the Emery Go Round.
well, that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yes, if you want to speak, if you go to the microphone on the left-hand side of the room, then we can all hear the benefit of your question.
Hi. Just a thought, because I'm also very interested in the money aspect of it, and I feel like I'm just bleeding money every time I get my real estate taxes. It's beginning to be overwhelming to me. And the AC, I'm paying the $96,000 to AC Transit. I know the value of having the Emery Go Round, though I admit I've never even ridden it, but I was very active in keeping it here on the peninsula. But money for me becomes an issue. What about considering not $130 or slightly under $100, but less money from the landowners so that indeed it would pass? Because I know just personally, I have to question, am I gonna vote for it or against it? Because right now, it would be over $200 for, between the AC parcel tax and whatever the P-bid would be charging me when I never use any of them. But if it was less money that I would have to pay into the P-bid, I would definitely vote yes for it. So instead of charging so much towards it, if it was less money, perhaps there would be a bigger percentage of people approving it. Because I think the Emery Grand is really important to us.
I would say is that the assessment's really determined by the assessment engineer looking at those objective criteria. I suppose it is possible for the city to look into if there's a way of a rebate or something like that. But anything that would be rebated to cause maybe a lower assessment in some areas would then be borne by the taxpayers because it would have to come from the city. So you may not get it on your property bill, but it would then be added to what the city is considering in its operating budget. Unless there's some other revenue stream.
He's going to get you one, but there's a fresh bottle. Tom didn't use it.
You should explain the weighted voting.
Yeah, the weighted voting.
Otherwise, you won't.
Again, the way the state law is around special assessment district is that essentially it is an assessment-based vote. And so someone, I think Ron said it's kind of like corporate shares, right? That so your share for your land use is the same for everyone who has that land use. But the number of shares you have would be based upon, I have one, based upon your square footage. In the case of a residential owner, how many units you owned. And so the vote is based upon the assessment that the property owner would pay. So large parcel owners, you can have a lot of units, a lot of square footage, pay more than someone who has less square footage or less units, and therefore their vote is weighted higher.
What about splitting it between parcel tax and sales tax?
What I would say for that, and we can maybe talk about this a little bit offline, is that parcel taxes now can't have split rolls, and so it would be the same parcel tax for residents and businesses. So if you're then talking about, so you're probably there actually looking at a higher cost for residents if you could only charge the same fee for every parcel regardless of its use. This way, because it's based upon special benefit, there are certain land uses, like, let's say, the regional retail shopping center that pay a premium because those are uses that generate a lot of trips. So they pay more, and their vote is higher as well, but they also are paying more. And remember that even if the assessment is upheld by the property owners, the city council still has to have a public hearing and still actually has to take a vote. And that is certainly an opportunity for those that feel that their voice was not heard through the ballot process to be able to speak to the council directly during that public hearing and impact the vote one way or another.
I had an owner ask me, and you already answered it, but maybe I'll ask it a different way. If there's a person that owns a studio unit with 400 square feet versus a pet house with 1,400 square feet, she was wondering if the assessment would be different for square footage size of unit. I explained to her that it would be the same for parcel.
It's the same,
regardless of the size,
for
right?
residents, it's by unit.
By unit,
For
regardless of
commercial,
size.
yes, and for commercial, it's structural square feet. And I will say there are some differences based upon, let's say, the number of bedrooms, but you're talking very minimal changes the way that would have been assessed. So just for lack of confusion and more clarity to make it the same. I mean, the difference might be a couple dollars or two, but nothing, I would say that would outweigh that administrative cost.
So in the voting, residential properties would be 20% 80% of the total money collected,
Yes.
would our vote only be 20% of the total votes?
It depends on who returns the ballot.
Pardon?
If only residents return the ballot, then the vote would be based 100% on the residential assessment. It depends on who
So
submits the ballot.
if all the commercial property owners are voting, and they have 80% of the vote, then our votes, we all vote, it's only 20% of the vote.
But then you can go to the city, the public hearing, and make your case directly to the city council.
He makes the points. Yeah, make it
Yes.
go 100% against it.
Well, the other challenge we have, Emeryville is heavily renter versus ownership. So you gotta get the 68% of the offsite owners in Emeryville that own property to vote for or against. And that's hard when you have 45 days, people on vacation.
Right, exactly.
It's really tough.
That's my point.
Yeah,
That was my point.
yeah. So that's why the hatch cover is beneficial, because we can put on there, hey, you're getting a ballot in June. The 48% offsite owners need to participate if they want their voice to
We
be
do
heard.
plan to send a postcard to all
Oh, good.
parcel owners
Good.
by I said May 8th, but I'm on vacation, so mid-May. It's kind of like a heads up, this is coming your way. And so there'll be a kind of a heads up postcard, so to speak, about 2 weeks before the actual ballot comes. And so, so it's kind of like look in the mail for your ballot. So hopefully that will help with the return
We
as
just
well.
found with offsite owners, we have a very poor return rate because they're offsite. They're on holiday, they got other things they're doing. So you'll get a higher percentage of onsite owners to vote because they're right here, they're at the meeting. But the offsite population doesn't vote as much as
It's
the
the
onsite.
same way with out of town
Sure.
commercial
It's
property
tough.
owners as well, or even trying to find out in the corporate structure who can sign the vote.
The city will only be able to vote up or down as opposed to unanimous change?
Up or down,
So
well, or less. I mean, but
they
you can't vote
tweak.
more.
They can't tweak.
No tweaking.
No tweaking or tweaking.
Before I came to this meeting, I had never heard the term assessment engineer, or professional assessment engineer. Who is it? Does he work for the city? And in the interest of transparency, who is it? And can I apply for that job?
The company's name is NDS Local Government Solutions. They do assessment districts of all type, lighting, undergrounding. They work on many different types of government financing, and so that's the
So it's a
company that
third-party
we use.
vendor.
It's a third-party vendor.
How do they know? What are their qualifications?
They've done assessment districts up and down the state
That's all
for
it
years.
is. I could hang a shingle and say I should.
But there's a land use Bible that.
Yeah, and also, you also have to be a registered engineer. I mean, there's a process that you go through to be able to be considered an assessment engineer. You just can't. Yeah. It's a profession, yeah. Like being an auditor, it's a profession. Anyone can audit, but not everyone's an auditor.
Anybody else? We want to thank Karen for taking the time out tonight.
And if you would like, certainly you can come back, when that draft management plan is available, because then, there'll be some real, dig in